go to the balcony and think, what did this look like in 1905 when they first moved here and their vista? Cora was a painter, and her studio was the Widow's Watch on the 3rd floor. Cora's significance, they were president of the Horticulture Society. She was the first woman member of the American Livestock Association. She and her compatriots were the individuals that got the 1917 alteration to the Selective Service Act passed to exempt farm workers. Cora was this wonderful, benevolent, philanthropist sort of individual. Returned from Washington, Kansas was the first state to pass that amendment. Came back here, and the first thing she did with her now farm-exempt workers was load up 10 rail cars of apple and send them to Atlanta. That was 2 weeks after the Great Atlanta Fire. I often think, I wonder what her vision was like looking at this and knowing that she'd built something that's going to really endure, but she's looking at a landscape that wouldn't endure, that things would change, that this wouldn't always be the center of a 2,000-acre orchard, that there would be houses and roads and more people. I go to the balcony and I wonder what she thought looking out here at the loading dock.
Apples, large, firm, and red, perhaps the most popular fruit in our part of the world. It will grow to become the trunk of a fruit-bearing tree. Blossoms in the spring are a sign of apples in the fall.
And I taught Kansas history. And one of the pieces that I remember, we did a piece on Cora Wellhouse Bullard, as far as, what role she played at the turn of the century in Kansas, since it was Leavenworth County, and this was, a big part of Leavenworth County at the time, and what they were doing. Her father and what he did in the Civil War, and then on into, the apple orchard and the business they had here.
I think back on what she said to one of the agricultural presentations that she made, and she talked about how happy she was to be there for several reasons. One was because she was a woman, and being as such, she liked to talk. And the second one was because she was raised on a farm, and that's what she had loved all through her life. Was born and raised in Pleasant Ridge, and so she appreciated the life of farm women. But she also worked for the right for women to vote, so she spoke across Kansas and across the United States, was a well-received speaker about farm life and agriculture. She was also on the board of directors of the Kansas State Historical Society. So I was really impressed with the work that she had done.
The people who live right here, they didn't know anything about it. They drive right here, they didn't know what is happening. Who live here? They see the mansion, but nobody did know anything about Cora, about Frederick Wellhouse. And I just think that now everybody in Tonganoxie knows about it.
We found what a brilliant person Cora was in designing this house on wrapping paper on the kitchen table of her old farmhouse. And we thought, as we dug into the history, we've got to honor what this woman intended. A little 5-foot woman that spends these hot summers sorting rocks for every size and color to build this house has got to be honored.
It's one of those things that for Cora to have been a female mason at the time, that she knew how to do a lot of this stonework and did a lot of it herself. That's a really incredible story, and it's the stories of these places that we like to see and keep that alive, for the future.
I understand that the rocks on the face outside of this house was gotten on a farm about a mile away. African American and Cora Bullard, they would take a lumber wagon and go over and pick up some rocks, bring them back, and he broke those rocks in. So the face, a lot of the face on these is flat, and he broke those rocks with the crude tools he had back in then.
Here is one of the apple grower's best friends, a ladybug. She eats small, leaf-destroying insects called aphids. Another friend of the fruit farmer is the bee. As the bees travel from blossom to blossom looking for sweet, they carry pollen which fertilizes the trees. Bees and other insects take care of most of the pollinating, while farmers do only a small part of the work by hand. But they find it pays them well.
To think that all of this entablature and all these fenestrations around the windows, the moldings and cornices were all done by hand in 1898. And here it is, 120 years later, just as solid as it was the day it was created. And I just marvel at that. And we often ask when we're working here, like I said before, how did they do this? We discovered one of the cornices that you see entablatures around the crown of the house. We discovered some of those in the old rock pile out behind the carriage house. And 3 of us lifted it up to try and get it on a scale. And we fractured a bathroom scale, which went to 300 pounds. So we just think, this woman was 5 foot nothing. How did this happen? So we marveled at the stonework. We really enjoyed the stonework. We were having a really difficult time finding the history of the house. As we dug through the house and started working on it, we started finding things that give us more and more clues. And we thought, as we dug into the history, we've got to honor what this woman intended. A little 5-foot woman that spends these hot summers sorting rocks for every size and color to build this house has got to be honored. So the historical connections of the house just go on and on and on and on.
The fact that the east porch was used for a famous speech back in the early 1900s, that's impressive. The fact that the verandas are there, that these are things that were used. The pictures that I've seen of Cora and her father are sitting outside. This was a comfortable place to be. There wasn't air conditioning in the early 1900s. And so if you wanted to be comfortable for a good share of the year, you needed to be outside under trees with plants. And this place is that. And the Porters have done a beautiful job of restoring gardens and landscaping.
The sad exit of Cora from the house after her husband died, just 7 months later, she was gone. And I left everything here, left her big touring car in the barn.
In 1936, Mr. Merritt, John Merritt, lived here. My dad took a job with Mr. Merritt. I was a child, 3 years old. It was a very old, unkept house, well water. They still use the pump and the well at this place. My dad and a man named Merle Rush farmed this land, about 180 to 250 acres. They worked from early morning till late at night. My dad received $25 a month pay and was furnished milk and eggs because that was part of the farm. Merle and Gracie Rush lived in this house, and they cared for Mr. Merritt. Merle and Gracie Rush never had any children, and they loved children, so they took my little brother and I under their wings and let us stay all night in this house and play up here on this lovely porch and all the kind of things that no one else got to do. And eventually Mr. Merritt's son-in-law wanted to take charge of the farmland and the outbuildings. And so his name was Claude Decker. And my dad and Merle Rush refused to work with him because of his attitude and whatever else. And so they quit. Mr. John Merritt died August 1st of 1951.
My family and I lived here from approximately 1942 to 48, so I was a young girl at that time. My family didn't own this house. My father rented a place and farmed the ground. I have lots of wonderful memories of those days. My brother was in the Marines, and during part of the time that we lived here, and the memory of him calling and saying he was coming home after the war was one I'll never forget, because the family was so happy. We had a big party, and as I recall, we had a big keg of beer in the kitchen, and everybody danced, and it was just a great party. We had a blind pony named Tommy, and he was right out there in that pasture, and we used to ride him with no bridle, no saddle, or we'd guide him with our knees, and some of my older sisters even rode him to school. We had him for many, many years. This was my job as a young girl, dusting the stairway. I slept in here with my sisters that were 8 and 10, and they had the double bed, and I had a small bed, as I recall. It was right over under that window. All my older sisters and brother, they milked cows, and we always had a big garden, and if you lived on a farm, you worked. I told Kent one night, my sister's boyfriend, who she later married, got stuck out here on the drive, and instead of coming in and tell my dad, he walked to town. It was a good place, had all kinds of places to play, and rode my tricycle around the porch, and we roller skated. There were just so many opportunities here. And I had lots of friends come out, and I had one particular girlfriend that used to come, and she was always going to stay the night. But the house was so big that when it started getting dark at night, she got scared, and her dad always had to come get her. It was hard to leave. It's a beautiful place, but my father bought a farm west of town, and up to that point, we hadn't owned our own place, so that was something they looked forward to too. But it wasn't nice, as big as this place.
By midsummer, the apples are half grown, and it's time to thin them. This way, the growers get larger, better quality apples at harvest time. Thinned apples aren't wasted. They're gathered for feed or left to rot and enrich the soil. The growing apples become so heavy, the branches must be propped or they will break. Special poles are used to brace the limbs. The props will be left in place until the apples are picked.
We had Clydesdales, and they're very expensive to keep at a boarding facility. Boarding bills were getting kind of outrageous, and no one wanted the liability of those big horses should they get sick, because you can't transport them in a normal trailer. They weigh 2,200 pounds, and you need an 18-wheeler to move them. And the farriers don't want to work on them because their hoofs are like pie plates, dinner plates. So I started looking for property with acreage, and I found modern houses, which didn't appeal to me at all. I'd always lived in older houses. At that time, I had a 1920s house just south of the plaza in Kansas City. And by accident, a patient of mine, mom was involved in real estate. And she called and she said, there's a property out near Tonganoxie that you might be interested in. It's really getting away from these people, and they've decided to sell it. I think there's 20 or 30 acres with it. There's no fence, but she said, boy, the house, it's worth you having a look at. So I came and had a look at it and thought, this is really a pretty amazing place. At that point, didn't know anything about the history. We moved them out here, built the fence. Neighbors had the first inkling, I think, of what a maniac had moved across the road from them. He's going down the roadside with an old Ferguson tractor and an auger on it, digging fence posts every weekend. We spent 2 years building fence and moved the horses out. That was how it started. It was just a place to get away from board bills and move the horses. And I did want to get further out in the country. The area south of the plaza in Kansas City, very crowded and very congested. But we saw the lay of the land, and it was soft ground. All of our Clydesdales had come from rocky ground in Colorado. One with real severe leg injury, could not wear shoes anymore, couldn't be on rocky ground. I walked around the property and I thought, this is perfect for Willie, and this will work really well. And I had time at that point to come work on the property, start building fence before we actually needed to move here.
We had horses before here, but they started to be old and die, and we just didn't have time to take care of new horses. And I never want to old home, because I had not too old, but old home in Germany, townhouse. And I knew what can be there. We call this in Russia, cat in a bag. You don't know what is the kind of cat in a bag. Can be bad, can be good, who knows?
I was dismayed at what had been done inside the house to modernize it. And I think they did the best they could. You know, I don't want to say anything bad about the previous owners. I think their vision was certainly not mine. Their vision was to have a house. They had a large family that was comfortable and they could just live in from day to day. But I don't think the historic significance of the house, first of all, they didn't know that much about it. But that did set me back a bit as I just looked around and wondered, I wouldn't have chosen that blue carpet, or I wouldn't have put wallpaper there. I was a little taken back by some things, and it was obviously done just kind of in a utilitarian fashion. There was no attempt made to really restore and recapture the grandeur of the house. And again, I have to go back and say, I didn't know what a grand place it was or how much it meant to all the people of this area. And the history of the house was rapidly being lost. So we were having a really difficult time finding the history of the house. As we dug through the house and started working on it, we started finding things that give us more and more clues. And then about 4 years ago, we started real research on the history of the house, and we're just amazed. At that point, we were far enough along that some historically correct individuals had seen the house and said, you know, this property really probably qualifies for national recognition. If you'd have any interest in doing that, it's quite a process. And again, I said, how tough can it be? We've done other houses and we're used to a lot of paperwork. Nothing prepared us for our final nomination for historic registration, which was 47 pages, 16,400 words, 66 references, 70 photographs, 2 years of full-time research.
One December afternoon at the Tonganoxie Historical Society, I had been a docent there for a little while, and then they decided to make me a paid intern. Kent and Olga walked in, and they were interested in looking at some research for the farm. Just started talking to them, and immediately the charismatic of Kent Porter came right out, and we just started having a conversation about history, the house, and then that's what I brought up. You know, I do metal detecting as a hobby and for the historical purpose. Him and Olga were floored about the idea of somebody coming out just to look around for historical objects pertaining to the house. Immediately started finding pieces of history that pertained to the house, with some suspender clips a couple of coins. Then I found this rifle butt plate here. I believe it goes to an old Winchester or an old Marlin lever action rifle. Kent took it and he polished it up to make it look real nice and pretty. That was one of the first things I'd found on the property, along with a couple old coins and all that. So I had come out here multiple times, and every time I'd come out here, even to this date, every time I come out here, I find something new. I had actually found this right here, and it's a 1915 Buffalo nickel that I had previously missed. And like I said before, every time I come out here, I will find something that I had missed. So this nickel has been in the ground for Lord knows how long, and I just thought it was very cool, and it just showed everybody here that how metal detecting works and what there is out there to be found. I mean, I have done metal detecting, like I said, for 5 years, and in that short amount of time, I've found enough to last some people a lifetime, and found stuff that people won't even find in their lifetime. And then they were telling me about more historic areas of the property, like down by the drive where the rail station used to be. And that is where I had found this emblem for Cora Wellhouse's 1919 Buick touring car, and it was definitely off of her car, because when she upped and left the property, she left everything here, including her famed prized touring car. So that Buick emblem definitely had to have come off of her car, like it's almost no doubt. So some months go by, and I'd been finding a bunch of stuff, nothing extremely significant. And then about 5 months ago, around Christmas time, I got a brand new metal detector, the Garrett AT Max, and it's a very wonderful machine. I have found so much with it, and I had thought, I'd found just about everything that was to be found, even in this area with my old metal detector. I was sorely mistaken. One of the first things I had found here on the property, and just in general with the new metal detector, was I found this front part to a Civil War staff officer's button, and Frederick Wellhouse was a captain of the Kansas militia in the Civil War. He has a very, very rich history, and I found this button right out in the front yard with the new metal detector, and I knew it had to have been him, because I don't know what other Civil War officers would have been coming here. And he was known to wear his coat even after the war. A lot of veterans did, because they were proud of it. Kent was all the way down by the road, and I was up here, and I sprinted without pausing all the way down to the road. And by the time I got down there, I was out of breath, and we just paused and just soaked up the rich history that was in that button.
What we uncovered was so satisfying that we felt this is too significant to everybody in this area, in Kansas, nationally. We just can't let the tide wash these footprints away.
By autumn, the apples are fully grown, and thousands of pickers come into the orchards to harvest the ripe red fruit. Pickers gather the apples just as they mature, so when the fruit reaches the grocer's shelves, it's sweet, good, and ready to eat. Notice the picking bags used by the workers. The canvas bottoms allow the pickers to dump the apples without bruising them. All the apples in one section of the orchard are loaded from one central point. The boxes are only partially filled, so they can be stacked without injuring the top layer of fruit.
We fell in love with Kent, and I told him, well, your life is my life. Let's struggle together. Let's rebuild this home and don't give this home die.
So we started in with the real classic restoration and rehabilitation of the house at that point, and with the goal of going toward National Historic status. And then started accumulating all the people to help us, because you cannot do this by yourself. It takes an army to do it.
After when I finished this military career, and I started to make like design work for people in Germany. All my neighborhood asked me to help design their home. And now I combine all of this together. I did design in home. When we started discovering all of these articles we find exactly plan of home where there was, for example, den, this was library, living room. I said, oh my gosh. And I start to do the blueprint for national registration because I engineering degree. So I start to look this, it is exactly what we return kind of in a plan which was before.
I think Kent moved in here the year before we moved in our house. And I've watched everything that's happened, transpired at this place from the get-go all the way till this minute. Very interesting. Most of the time is just we communicated just when we were mowing, and then he came over and asked me if I could do this job for him, and which I said sure. He had some brass, solid brass plates that went on a door, and he also had a box with him. Then he opened it up and he pulled out this glass knob that went on this door. He says, "Can you make these holes any bigger?" And I said, "Absolutely." So we just started. I bored them all out to the same diameter and stuff, and then he handed me this glass knob, and he told me when it was made, one thing and another, and I says, "Good." It sure is. I don't want to drop this thing because it's quite old.
Most important thing is that he was happy with what he got. It's a very hard project here, very long, ongoing project that, consumes a lot of life, It's very important that he's happy.
We've been working with Dr. Kent for 5 years on the project. Initially, our introduction was he came in with a list of questions. It was quite apparent that he was knowledgeable about our process, but he also wanted to gain some sort of level of trust that we were going to be able to handle his project in the way that he would expect it to be done. All those brackets that he made up there along the guttering, he hand forged those and we powder coated them. Powder coat's gonna last a lot longer. It's instead of liquid paint that eventually chips.
Saw an ad for a woodworker and I thought, well, I'll give this guy a call, and sure enough, it was Kent. Right away, he was a funny guy, he was asking me questions like, he wanted to know if I knew the difference between a hammer and a garden hose, because he'd had a hard time finding kids that knew the difference. And he needed someone who had a little bit of a solid background in woodworking.
Ken called me up, told me to come up and look at this staircase. And I did, and I looked at it, and the place was a mess.
Kent and Olga called our company. They were having a difficult time finding a company that could embrace their vision to keep the house as original as possible.
Many people came and went. And my idea with all of them was, if you can't do this particular thing better than I can do it, you don't need to be here. And that was my philosophy all along, because I can cobble up a lot of things. I can do electric, I can do plumbing, I can do stonework, I can do woodwork, I can do all this sort of thing. But I can't do it the best.
The intent was to keep everything original to the home so that it could become part of that National Historic Registry. And so the integrity of the work was really critical to the success of the overall project.
We did discuss rebuilding, and it was very clear very early that that was not an option. So we had to go to Plan B, and Plan B we went to.
Out here, you never could really make a mistake. You would just be encouraged to go back to the drawing board, but with lots of support and lightheartedness.
We managed to find a collection of free artists, as Olga called them, and this eclectic collection of people who were willing to certainly put up with my eccentricities and do things in a way that they always wanted to do, but many of them have told us, and I feel so happy about this, they said, I've never been able to work on a project where I've been able to do it the way I thought it should be done. It's always been the boss saying, this is the way we'll do it.
Ours is pretty simple. It just needed refinished. It wasn't tore up or beat up. We didn't have to replace anything. We just sanded the original wood down and finished it back the way it should have been.
They were having multiple issues with all three of the chimneys leaking water down into the attic and living space.
When we went into the attic, it was covered in soot. bare rafters and roofing.
At first, it was like a faucet was being turned on anytime a rain cloud was close. They were leaking that badly, and we started sealing all the mortar, but then even the stones themselves had fissures in them, and so it took a lot of effort. Multiple times we were out here trying to do the best that we could to embrace their vision. It was something that, okay, we'd come out and do as much as we could, and let's wait till the next rain. We would hose the chimneys down, and we'd have somebody else in the attic space. Yep, we're getting a leak on this chimney. Problem with that, and the reason it was difficult to hose it down every time, it's unsafe to be on a roof that steep with wet shingles. And so we had to take safety into precaution. One time I was out and I was in a real hurry because the storm was coming, and I took a couple minutes up on top of the roof and just watched the clouds coming in, but I was sure to get off the roof before it started raining.
We added a full bathroom to the attic so that you wouldn't have to leave the space to go to the bathroom or disrupt anyone else to go to use the restroom. We remanufactured and redid the windows and hand-formed casings and everything like that. If we didn't have the original piece because it was deteriorated or gone, we would make an exact matching piece to that by hand, try and stick to the craftsmanship that the original builders had. And there was a lot of things in the upstairs that really stuck out to me. Just totally reforming a door casing that looks like it should have been there the whole time. A lot of the pieces are handcrafted, and I mean handcrafted down to sanding with your fingers in a nook and cranny, or shaping with a gouge, or planing something out that is rough and unfinished and then bringing it to a final product.
One of the unique pieces that we got to do was, and this has been towards the end of the project, but Dr. Kent comes walking in and he has this floor-length mirror, and he had it meticulously masked. He had spent, I don't know, hours, days on every intricate scroll, and he had used a scalpel to make sure that it was just the most beautiful piece of masking I think anybody could appreciate. And I said, well, what would you like us to do with this today? And he says, I would actually like you guys to media blast that. I really want the glass etched. He says, it's taken me a very long time, but I have confidence in Sean. And so Sean and I both started laughing and saying, there's nothing like a little bit of pressure. We went ahead and we finished that project, and it was just stunning.
Staircases and the floors, the last time I really saw them, they weren't finished. And it was really a mess. But I just couldn't believe what I saw today. Everything's finished and spots shine.
I get here, and Kent trusted me quite a bit, which I appreciated. Our creative freedom would really kind of go unmonitored. Kent would have these crazy ideas of something that he wanted to create, and then he'd give me materials to manifest that out of. And obviously, here's some of the old spindles that he had stored away, and I'd always just kind of smile at Kent and kind of nod my head, not really say much, and just kind of get to work. And if I ever hit a snag, he'd bring out another box full of something else, and maybe it would match up here or here, and so maybe we would cut this one off, but we would need to recreate this curve and get out the body filler, the Bondo, the epoxy, whatever it was to shape and create and replicate.
They carry nearly 300 boxes of apples at a time. These boxes are delivered at the packing house. Here the boxes are unloaded on hand trucks and taken inside. Now the apples are poured out on a conveyor belt. The fruit is handled with great care at all times. Bruised apples are wasted apples. The bath washes off all dirt and residue left from spraying. These girls sort the apples to make sure no bruised or rotten fruit is packed. Constant care is taken to preserve the quality of the apple shipments.
I had a lot of doubts at first when I started, because so many things in the house were camouflaged one way or another. We didn't realize what had been done that we were going to just have to completely take out. We had the wiring, the electric turned off here for 2 years. The wiring was so bad. Wires twisted together, duct tape stuffed in the walls.
Essentially the only finished room when I started was Kent and Olga's bedroom, and it was just finished enough to be livable, honestly. The condition of the house when I first came, Kent and Olga had done a lot of work to it, so that it was in progress. They were painting the outside. We were replacing a lot of the shake shingle on the outside, doing the windows, all the storm windows, and every piece of glazing that was damaged, and anything that just over the past 100 years had deteriorated.
I did a lot of the prep paint work on the exterior, some interior, pulling all the windows, frames, all of that kind of thing, and also the tile work in the second floor bathroom, the pink marble, degrouting and regrouting that room, and from the original dilapidated kind of exterior, all the window caulking, all the power washing, priming, painting, and doing all the detail work of the trim paint and everything in multicolor.
The east end of the house, where we had to raise the house up and put all the steel girders underneath it and so forth, and blow the walls apart from the pressure on the house jacks, that was our workshop for 10 years. We had the table saws in there and the wood lathe, and oh my. The day that we moved all that out and the last piece went out, I walked back into these 2 empty rooms with the subfloor down, and I thought, this might turn into a real house. And the second time was the year we had the scaffolding all up the east side of the house. And we finally put the beams in place for the balcony, and we had a crew of 8 free artists here that summer, painting and doing our structural work, because we had a real short window of time getting that done due to the weather closing in on us. So we thought, well, we really need to get this done because the whole east end of the house was open. We couldn't have that unprotected during the winter, so we were really scrambling. I walked back and I saw the scaffolding, and I saw the guys clear up the roof of the peak doing the primer work and the final scraping, and I could see the shape of the balcony. And at that point, Andy carried this column up and set it in place and says, well, what do you think? It's not done, but what do you think? And I thought, well, we've done it. We've recreated this balcony, and it actually looks like a balcony.
I think Ken's favorite story, though, is when I house sat for him. He used to go out to Colorado frequently. His mom lived out there, and so he'd ask me to watch the house while he was gone. And so one night, it was getting to be kind of late, and I was coming out here to pick up the mail and feed the cat, and it was dark. So I came out here by myself, 16 years old. I come driving up the driveway, and I had my radio on. I wasn't thinking a thing of it, and I parked my truck, and as I got out, I was thinking, wow, it is really dark out here. It's really quiet out here. I thought, oh, well, this is my responsibility. I need to get up there and feed the cat and take the mail in, check on the house. So I go walking up to the back door, and I unlock the door and open it up, and the cat just goes flying past me, flying out of the house. And I jumped, and that cat was gone. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do now? The cat is out. It was completely dark out, and I didn't want to be out here walking around by myself looking for a cat. And I thought, well, I'll wait for a few minutes. That cat's hungry, it'll come back. So I came in the house and I put the mail down and put out the cat food. I'm kind of waiting and waiting. The cat's not coming back. And so I went and I sat down in the sitting room here in the front room. I thought, I'm just gonna make myself comfortable for a few minutes and wait for the darn cat to come back. And I swear that house, all of a sudden, just the old feeling just set in, and it's like everything just went silent. I'm sitting there and I could hear every creak and every groan of the house, and I'm getting more and more nervous. And I thought, okay, I wonder why that cat took off so fast. So I thought, I think I've had about enough time waiting for this cat. As I'm walking by this big staircase here in front, I look up and I swear that I see Cora coming down the stairs for me. I was just as fast as that cat. I took off out the door and I jumped in my truck and I was gone. And that cat was outside on its own for the rest of that night because I wasn't hanging around anymore. And I never came back out here after dark after that. I was so scared. It took me a while to come around and admit all of that. So. And I didn't know anything about Cora. I didn't know anything about the house at that point. Then he asked me one time, he's like, oh, have you ever seen Cora? I'm like, well, who's Cora? So then he told me all about Cora and the history. And I was like, yeah, I think I've seen her before. And I'm a pretty level-headed person. And so I really don't know what I saw that night. But he believes it, though. He's positive.
Cora's let us be here, and she's blessed us with her presence and benevolently.
There's been several people that have seen Cora out here, and I think maybe she's out here keeping him company still.
Even when I talk about it now, the hair kind of stands up on the back of my neck. I always felt like, you know, Cora was always there, kind of watching over and guiding us all.
We kind of felt she's kind of pushed us and guided us in various ways.
Yeah, the unexplainable kind of resides.
I enjoy the little office bathroom simply because we found the original tub out in the weeds.
In comes this clawfoot tub, and I'm like, okay, you got to tell me what the project is. And he says, I'm restoring a home at Stonehaven Farm. And he said, I have to tell you, I've been working on this for decades, and I'm in love with this place. So all those brackets, all those old lamps, those were pieces to the farm, and he said, absolutely. So he would bring in little stories every so often that he would drop in about the history of the home. So that has been really a fantastic story and journey for us to be a part of that.
I think they all feel a wonderful personal connection, which is evident in their work as you look around the work they did here. They didn't just do a job. They did something the best way it could be done.
We were very adamant about making sure that it was done right and that it was put back into its proper form, because otherwise it was just going to continue to deteriorate and fall down. And they wanted this house to live, you know, as long as it can. It's been a great process here, and I love this place, and I feel connected to this place.
We were very fortunate to have that wonderful collection of individuals. I think it's been kind of a spiritual journey for all of us. And seeing that we've had this opportunity that's been given to us to do something much bigger than yourself. And few people ever get that in life. And we're really blessed with that.
There were times when we had challenges, you know, in the balconies and redirecting water or, you know, the technical stuff. But for me, it was to walk away with the project not completely finished and hoping that it would be delivered, or I could pass the torch to someone who could honor what it was. And it was so hard for me to walk away from this place when it was time. And Kent would call me and he'd say, you know, the Vampire Mansion is crying out for the master woodworker to come back, you know, and he'd leave me these really jovial messages on my phone to twist my arm to try to get me to come back. And it always tugged at my heart, you know. We would just create, you know, and it was never a burden, or it was mostly a challenge. And we had a phrase, you know, we're after this is all done, Andy, you know, we're either going to be heroes or we're going to be goats, you know. And so we made a lot of goat sounds around here, but there were those days where we were a hero too. We went home successful.
One of the best things you can do in life is to do something good for someone that can't possibly repay you. And I think we've done something good here for a lot of people that will never even know us. They'll just have to look back and say, well, yeah, many years ago, these guys bought that house and redid it. And so we've kind of done that. We've done something good for people that we'll never know. It's sort of like a blind organ donor. You don't know who saved your life. but you're sure grateful to them.
Seeing the progression from disrepair to a gym over the 20-year period, it's mind-boggling that someone actually took on this daunting task and completed it in such a fashion. It's incomprehensible to some people. I mean, and me as a historian, the way they restored it back to 1890s, early 1900s progressive era spec, it's just amazing, really.
This means a lot to him, and he breathed a lot of life back in this house that otherwise would not have been here.
After I retired in 2005, and then we started watching more of what's going on over here. And it's like I said, it's remarkable. I hope he gets everything that he deserves.
He never gave up. You know, this has taken him decades to complete, but Dr. Kent and his wife have such tenacity and passion for this project. So it's contagious. We're glad to be a part of it.
A lot of it's Kent and Olga, honestly. Their drive is something that I strive for every day, honestly. I've never met two people that worked as hard as they do. And it's all self-motivated. There's no one saying, hey, you got to do this. They get up, they make their list, and they get it done. And if they don't get it done, they work on it the next day until it's done. And in that process, you find new projects, and they work on those until they're done.
We have been friends since I did this job. You know, last year we met them. They have a Santa Claus rescue in downtown Lawrence over Thanksgiving to celebrate the Christmas season. We were down there because I'm also a firefighter, and Ken and I were just ooging over the big fire truck, you know. And we walked around the truck and ran into each other. When we were here before, Ken was working on the mechanical system in the basement. That probably impresses me the best because he designed that, he had that all done to his specs, and everything is marked where it goes, the water lines, the electric line. And it sounds stupid, but when you look at it, it has to be, because this house is so big and everything just goes everywhere.
They have done an absolutely fabulous job. I've never seen anything done so well, and they just you can see the love that they've put into everything that they've done here. Not only brought it back to life, but they take care of it once they've gone through all this work. But we've driven by here so many times when we would go to Lawrence, and to see the work progress, and then finally get to come here and see the results. It's really neat.
I still dream about Olga's blintzes that she would make in the morning for breakfast. I knew I had reached a level of acceptance when I got invited over early for breakfast, and Olga would cook her Russian blintzes for breakfast. And my stomach remembers those very well. Thanks, Olga.
Finally, the apples are packed. Each apple is skillfully wrapped in colored tissue and carefully placed in a box. Then the filled boxes move on conveyor rollers to the nailing machine and taken to the shipping room, where they will be sent out all over the world. Ripe, red, wholesome. Here's the full-grown apple, a product of the planters, the pickers, and the packers of America's apple industry.
The property wouldn't be here without Olga and Kent. It would, I mean, it could be just like the cornfield across the street. It could be nothing, and only a select few would remember it. They have kept it up, and well, they've restored it, and will be keeping it up. And I know for forever. I mean, without them, this property would not exist probably. I mean, the barn had fallen down by the time Kent got here, and he said the house was on its way, and that's 100% truth. So it's good that they preserved it.
I think our community is just so blessed to have them. I don't think anybody else could have done with the house what they've done with it. You know, it was a beautiful old stately house to begin with, but for them to add to it what they have, it's unbelievable. And so I think the community is just so lucky to have them, that they took the time and energy and expense to do what they have to restore this house, to bring it back to its original beauty, and to want to preserve that and maintain it. It's just so amazing that somebody would want to do that. And yeah, the time they've put into this, It's amazing.
I can't help but walk up and start looking at all the work I did and make sure it's actually right. So it's beautiful, it looks great. It's really neat seeing everyone's work come together on a project like this. Like hanging the doors and things like that in the interior. When I left, they still had a few rooms that were just basically work rooms. So that's the most shocking, is the interior. Seeing everything put together in the 3rd floor and everything.
What they're doing here is pretty incredible and unique, because Cora Wellhouse Bullard was an incredible feminist and an incredible role model for young women in this area. And because they've restored the house, I think that more people will get to know who Cora Wellhouse was. And I think that's important. I think that this town has had a lot of women that were important and did things on their own. And I think that the more of that we can bring to the fore, the better we are. The fact that the Porters have done this on their own is wonderful for the community. The fact that they welcome the community into the home to see what they've done, to talk about Cora, that's pretty cool. That's history.
They called me probably 3 months ago, and we talked a bit, but I had not seen their home since it was fixed so elegantly. So elegant in there. Everything's elegant. There isn't anything untouched. It's just gorgeous. What's so lovely about it is how he's done everything himself. All the plumbing, all the work. It just seems impossible that a man could do all of that. And his wife, of course, is wonderful housekeeper. She has done the landscaping, keeps that up very nice.
Oh, it's wonderful. And over the years, I've wanted to come back here so bad to see it. And they've done a wonderful job. I'm so happy that they have restored it, because it's such a wonderful, beautiful home.
I just want to thank, Dr. Kent and Uncle Porter for, having the wherewithal and the vision to, renovate that and restore it and get it both on the local and the national historic preservation sites registers, because it's just, once again, that's such a key part of Kansas history. Knowing your history and where your area comes from, that's what makes that special.
I often think about this young teenager in Amsterdam writing in her diary that you will do things in life and you'll never know how many people they'll touch and how what you do will spin through the universe and touch people that you never expect, that you'll never know, and somehow affect their life. And we look at what we've done here, and the house long before we were ever here touched thousands of people. And the process that we've done has touched many more. And hopefully we've preserved it now so it'll touch thousands more in the future. And this will be the mark that we leave above the tide line. And we'll leave this for everybody. And what we've done here will be here for everybody 100 years after I'm gone.